Hello, and welcome to a video series concerning the Mahabharata, an epic poem written about 4,000 years ago in the Indian subcontinent. This long poem, this is like one of 12 volumes, serves as the cultural zeitgeist of all of India's mythologies. Krishna, Hanuman, Vayu, every single god you can imagine in the Hindu pantheon shows up at least once in the poem or in subsequent stories. So in this series, I, Malhar Telly, am going to explore in depth the nuances and flavors that make up this giant smorgasbord of India's history. So come and join me as we explore the Mahabharata. This is Mahabharata on the Rocks. We begin our tale in the city of Hastinapur, the capital of the Kuru Dynasty and the center of most of our conflicts. Our story starts off with the crowning of the young king Shantanu. At that time, he was the scion of the Kuru Dynasty, but he was also a man desperately in search for love. I mean, what good is being a royal if you can't be romantic, right? As a member of the Kshatriya race, Shantanu was honor-bound to find the perfect woman to lead not only his kingdom, but his dynasty. And so Shantanu began a long, arduous search. Went through Swayamvaras, arranged meetings, but for all the princesses and noble ladies he met, couldn't find just the right one. And so he started to find other pleasures in life, began pursuing simpler things like hunting. Hunting's simple. You shoot an arrow, you get your gains. This is going to come back later. So Shantanu, while hunting, found himself strolling along the bed of the river Ganga. And as he crossed the banks, he thought to himself, man, why is it so hard to find a woman with the flow of the river Ganga? Sweet as can be on a sunny day, but temptatious and harsh when the need arises. She can feed 1,000,000 souls and she can crush 1,000,000 houses. Why can't I find a woman nearly as good as this river? Shantanu's bar, set that high, found himself looking along the river, gazing upon its beautiful, pristine waters, when he found himself staring at a woman along the banks. He approached her and was soon stunned by her beauty. So flabbergasted was he found himself standing before her, and before he could even think, he asked of her the one question that could only be on one man's mind when he sees a woman that beautiful. Marry me. The woman looked him twice over, a little nod of approval, and said, okay, I got a few conditions. Number 1, don't ask who I am. Number 2, don't ask where I'm from. Number 3, don't ask what I'm doing. Number 4, don't ask me why. Shantanu, the good king, conscionable leader, the scion of his dynasty, gave it 3 minutes and said, yeah, okay. And so they got married. It was a beautiful, beautiful wedding ceremony. Entirety of Hastinapur was colored for the festivities. And Shantanu found himself with the perfect wife. Her voice could flow as sweet as silk when she wanted it to. But when somebody challenged him and his authority, she would rise up like a raging river and quell the dissent. She knew her stuff. She knew her Vedas. She knew how to cook, clean, and sew. She was a font of knowledge. Whenever somebody had a question, she normally had the answer. Shantanu was so happy. So he thought nothing could possibly go wrong with this. And for 9 months, nothing did. Until finally, he had a kid. And Shantanu discovered one type of love he never considered before, the love of fatherhood. He held his baby boy to the sky and said, "This is what I always wanted in life." And the next morning, the child was gone. He searched around madly. He looked around to find his wife was missing as well, and so he stirred the entire kingdom up to find her. But when she returned, the child was gone. Now Shantanu had only one question on his mind. What happened? How could you lose a child? What did you do? But here's the thing about a deal in the Indian mythology. There are no takebacks, not without severe consequences. And Shantanu, as a Kshatriya, was well trained on the consequences of breaking a terms of service agreement. So, Shantanu clamped his mouth shut and silently prayed he would never have to go through that again. And for 9 months, he kept on praying. He kept on praying, but he also figured out that if you want something done, you gotta do it yourself. The gods weren't watching out for my son, I will. And so at the end of those 9 months, he had a second child. This time the festivities were even greater, but this time, Shantanu stayed up. He burned the midnight oil. He said, "No, I'm going to make sure this kid spends the night safely." But as he lay in bed, thinking about how safe his son would be from tomorrow onwards, his wife began to move. He turned to his side to see her sneaking out of bed. He could only watch as she picked up the child from its cradle. But as she walked away, he rose up to follow. And follow he did, through the empty streets, through the plains, and through the forests, up until the point where she reached the banks of the river Ganga. And before Shantanu could muster up the courage to break his contract, to break his oath, she lifted the child above her head and cast him into the waters. Now Shantanu had a few pretty important questions. Pretty reasonable. Who is this woman? Where is she from? What is she doing? Why is she killing our kid? But deal's a deal. Gotta read those terms of service before you sign them. And so Shantanu held his tongue. And it happened again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, until finally, on the 8th child, Shantanu mustered up the courage and will to say, "Stop! Stop it! Put the boy down! What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Who are you? Where are you from?" The woman calmly held the child, brought him back down into a little quarter in her arms, and said, "Okay, I'll answer your questions now. Number 1, I am the river Ganga. 2, I am from the river Ganga. 3, I was about to drown this child. 4, well, that's a whole other story. See, once upon a time, this kid had been one of 8 brothers, and they were all devas, celestial beings, who decided in their infinite wisdom to mess with the rishi, to mess with a sage. And this sage, upon realizing that these 8 kids stole his cow, he turned upon them and gave them the worst curse a deva could ever have: a human life. Not only mortal, but aware of it. The devas, taken aback, scared, terrified by this ungodly fate, turned to everyone they knew. They begged for some form of mercy. They turned to the rishi and returned to him again and again, giving alms and begging for a stay on their unfortunate punishment. But there are no takebacks. in the Mahabharata. There are no takebacks in Indian mythology. So the Rishi could not undo his curse. But he did lean back after a while and said, I'll sweeten the deal. 7 of you get to have the shortest, briefest lives a human could imagine. But the eighth one, I will give a life grander, longer, far larger than all 8 of your lives combined. And that is all he will be remembered for. Even if he is reborn once more, I will ensure that nobody remembers who he is unless it is in the context of that single life. That's how badly you are punished. And you might be thinking, it doesn't sound too bad. But to a deva, it's a death sentence. It's worse than death. To a deva, life is almost eternal. And your story is what defines who you are. And so this deva, his name is forgotten in time because all he is remembered for is for being that child, the child in Ganga's arms. The child that King Shantanu had also given away the moment he chose to break those terms and conditions. His oath broken, King Shantanu could only watch as the river Ganga came up and swallowed both his wife and child. And for 16 years he lamented. He cursed himself for his weakness. How dare I question my wife? But at the end of the 16 years, he found himself walking along the river Ganga, and a storm hit. And to escape the surge, he hid in a banyan tree. And as he waited out the swell, he heard the distinct twang of a bow. So he went and he checked out who was shooting the bow. He found on the opposite banks of the Ganga a resplendent youth, glowing beneath the rain, firing arrow after arrow into the river Ganga. And this man had a few questions. Who is this kid? Where is he from? What is he doing? Why is he doing it? And as if to answer all 4 of those questions, the river Ganga appeared behind him. This is Devavrat, she said, your son. I have trained him in all the arts, politics, war, religion. I have trained him to be the perfect king. Right now, he's just having some fun. We like playing with the river sometimes. It's our thing. And we are doing it because this will be our last day together. He now returns to you, the perfect prince, Devavrat. Devavrat is about to become one of our principal characters. But to find out how, you'll have to catch the next video. Till then, have a good one. Hey, thanks for sticking with that. I admit it goes a bit long. I'm still figuring out this format. But if you liked what you saw, I highly encourage you to like and subscribe. But most importantly, please comment. I would love to hear more about how people have interacted with this story and what it means to them. I invite everybody to join in on the conversation. So, carry on. Shantanu literally simped for a river.